What's up, guys? I'm Dr. Donald Moll from Kinetic Impact. This is Dr. Ben DeLuca from Kinetic Impact. We got Dr. Kevin Lung over there from Kinetic Impact, and we got
Alex Nunez, Ignite Performance and Fitness.
And we are going to be talking today with Coach Fred Duncan, coach, presenter, and author. Author of Your Fat, Let's Change That, Feast, Fast, Fit, and authors of articles from many magazines as well as peer-reviewed publications. So you're a former D1 athlete, and you had the opportunity to mentor under Coach Buddy Morris, who's a strength conditioning coach for the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah.
We were talking about this earlier. He's like, you can't find anything on him, and honestly, hard to find some stuff about you. So I want to hear about you. I want people to learn a little bit about you because I know you're humble and don't put a lot out there. So, so you mentored under Buddy Morris. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I met Buddy when I was 19, and I was having a lot of shoulder pain. I had seen Chiros, I had done acupuncture. Like I went through the whole. It still exists today. That you know, biomechanical model where like every single person I saw thought they knew what was wrong with me, and they were going to do this, this, and that. And I never got any better. And he was in Buffalo because he had just been let go in Cleveland. The whole staff, the Browns, had been let go. And they said, you should talk to this guy, he might be able to help you out a little bit. And at that point, I was pretty desperate, so I was like, okay. And like I was telling you, I went and I talked to him a little bit at the gym, and he was just, the way that he was talking about training in the human body, I was like, how the fuck does this guy know so much? And I was like, you know, what did you major in? And he was like, communications. And I was like, well, why do you know all of this? And he's like, you know, gives me the whole spiel, how long he's been doing this. His philosophy, which is very simple, which is he believes that you should read something towards your craft every single day. He went and he lived with Louis Simmons at one point. He would go and visit Dr. Michael Yesis. He would go to cadaver labs. He would go to physical therapy clinics, and he would read every single day. And so he changed how I looked at my injury, how I viewed everything training-wise, and made me believe that could be a job. At the time, I was planning on going to law school, and I did go to law school for 1 year, and I was like, this is fucking miserable. I want to do what this guy does. And but at that point, my background was I had a pre-law major and a minor in English. And I was an athlete, and I had always worked out. But up to that point, Arnold was my idol before I had met Buddy. And so he was like, he was my kind of my guide for what I wanted to do from there. And so I'll never forget when I started to talk to him about, okay, how do I transition? What do I do? He's like, here, I'm gonna get you the stuff that I want you to read. I'm like thinking, okay, cool. It's like it's gonna be a book or something. I'm like, I got Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding because that's not what I need. And he brought me this fucking massive box of Russian physical education papers. Like half of them were in Russian. And he's like, you should read all these. And I was like, well, what even is this? Yeah. I was like, oh, I'll try. I was like, a lot of this, he's like, just read it, look at the diagrams. And I think part of it, he was just like, he really valued these because these were the old Soviet, and then they actually did have incredible information in them. Like the stuff they were talking about 30, 40 years ago, we're talking about now. I think a little bit he wanted to fuck with me, but the other part was he kind of wanted to see if I was serious about it. And so I read it and tried to understand as much as I could, and then after that, super training and all the books that they typically tell you to kind of go through and read, and that was kind of it. So from that point, I never really looked back. I adopted the mentality that he told me to adopt, and I started to work. I think it's funny because I had interned with him before, and I had seen him work a lot. And I'll be honest that I had done personal training for a couple years, like I was doing that when I was in college, but I didn't feel like I was qualified to train athletes. And that was even after years of training people and years of watching him. And I think that's just because that's how serious he took it, is that he made it seem to me that, like, if you don't know what the fuck you're doing, then don't do this. And so I still remember, like, I had watched him work so much, I had read so much, I had years of training people, and I still felt like I'm not qualified to train athletes. But, you know, that's how you learn, right? So I never really looked back after that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So do you want to athlete? What did you play?
I played tennis. I actually went to Saddlebrook, which is it's like an academy like IMG in Florida. I was going to try to go professional, but I was having a lot of shoulder issues. And really my issue, I have suprascapular nerve impingement, so I have a really rare injury where, like, I don't have an infraspinatus. The muscle is completely atrophied. Anybody that I ever saw was like, you probably even shouldn't be able to play at the level you're playing at. But really where I was screwing myself up was just my total volume of work. And nobody ever addressed that until Buddy. I was having upper back, neck, and whatever spasms almost every other month, every 2 to 3 months. And doctors were legitimately just giving me Medrol dose packs, prednisone, every 2 to 3 months. And I was taking Advil every single day. And I didn't think anything of it. Like, I was competing at a really high level. There are guys right now in the top 10, top 5 that I was playing against. And so I just thought that was the lifestyle. And he was the first one that was like, you have to understand that you're only as good as your ability to recover, and you can only pull from so many adaptive resources every single week. And right now, you're just trying to do way too much. And by just simply scaling back my volume, whether it was practice, whether it was in the gym, it was like kind of night and day. It was like, and I still had surgery. So I had a doctor that did convince me that I needed surgery. The surgery didn't do anything, but obviously never followed up with me. That's just kind of how that world is. But all I ever really needed to do, it's not like that's going to take care of the fact that I have nerve impingement, but it cut down the amount of pain and how frequently I was having those issues. And it was such a simple answer.
So that had a pretty big impact on you. So it went from him helping you as an athlete to interning with him. You had were going towards law, and then went to Chiro school, correct?
Yep. Yeah. So he was like, he was a little jaded towards the industry just because it's strength conditioning in terms of high level college or pro is just a lot about who you know. And usually when a coach gets hired, they bring all their own guys on staff. When a coach gets fired, they usually fire the entire staff. And so it's one of those things where it's like, it's funny, like there used to be a head coach of football at Buffalo who he got fired, and then eventually he was hired as the strength coach at Notre Dame. He was just a football coach. He had never been a strength coach before. It was just a way to get the guy on staff. But like, it's also just how little they actually value strength conditioning in that world. The majority of teams, GMs, whoever, they kind of just view it as a side dish. It's like, and I mean, I think you can see that. Like, didn't the Chiefs have a rating that was rather low for their strength staff, for their training staff this past year? And they're the Super Bowl champ. And you could probably look every single year at some of the top teams in the league and look at their strength staff and what they do. And it may not be the best one in the league. They could still be the best team. And at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. But yeah, so he was a little jaded about it. He was like, maybe it's safer if you go and try and get a degree in PT or Chiro or whatever. And I think in some regards that's correct. So I actually started in physical therapy school, and after my first semester, first year, I went to the dean and I asked for my money back, and they said no.
I mean, they didn't have a forgiveness program?
No, well, I went in and because like everything I was learning, I was either talking to buddy about or had already learned. I felt like more than this, and I was like, what am I paying for? And a lot of the shit that we were learning was just wrong. And so I brought all of that to her attention. She didn't really care, and she was like, okay, well then why don't you transfer into the chiropractic program, because you've already taken gross anatomy, and I took like all the classes you also need for chiro. She's like, or you could do PA, physician assistant. I was like, I don't really want to do that, so I guess I'll try chiro. And then I fucking hated chiropractic. Like I know that, I mean, you do what you gotta do, and every single person in my program did not believe in chiropractic. They were all there simply because they were like, I think I can make decent money like this. But we don't actually really believe what we're doing. None of the teachers really seemed to have a clue what they were talking about. I was the only one in the program that didn't let anybody adjust me. And so they all didn't like me to begin with. And then eventually, I wasted a lot of time there, but I started to just take classes I thought would help me, like that I could learn stuff from. So like I took neuro and, physiology, whatever, and then I was like, okay, I'm done. And I left. And at that point, Buddy and I actually opened our facility in Buffalo, and then the rest is history. I kind of took that over when we went to Arizona.
Interesting. So it's almost like a full circle, because this weekend, and this is why you're here, by the way, I forgot to mention that, you'll be teaching your course, Common Sense Training, and the audience will be a mix of strength coaches, personal trainer. There's a skills coach, a soccer skills coach will be here, chiros and PTs. Right? So it's almost like a full circle, asking for your money back from PT school to getting in front of the room and hopefully helping clinicians and coaches learn together and grow their mindset. And it's funny, it's a full circle. And my question though is, how has that perspective had an impact in how you coach currently, or I guess how has that chapter kind of influenced you?
You're saying like
the PT school and chiro school.
I mean, I think that highlights just, I feel like, the fragility of knowledge and the sometimes like the false belief that we know what we're talking about, because I definitely felt like I'm in a doctoral program, I'm taking doctoral classes, I'm learning all this really great information, and then to have people that I really valued their opinion, like Buddy and other physical therapists that he knew and other strength coaches, kind of shit all over it. I was like, this is really humbling. Like he already humbled me the first time we met, and I was like, I thought I knew a little bit about training. I didn't. Then I go and I try to learn a little bit more, and I come back, and they're still like kind of laughing. And so I think that basically just showed me is that like there is no answer. There's no like this doesn't end. Nobody really like has some black book of secrets that the other person doesn't have. It's just like there are some people that are constantly trying to get better, and then there are some people that learn what they learn and stay there. And I didn't want to be that person, and I didn't want to practice something that I didn't believe in. So that led me to do strength conditioning, because at the end of the day, that's what really helped me. I really wanted to help people. I felt like there's a stigma attached to chiro. I felt like there's a lot of red tape when it comes to PT. And so I just didn't vibe with that, because I felt like in order for me to have the kind of impact that Buddy had on me, I would have to have free reign to do kind of whatever I wanted to do.
And the strength and conditioning, like the title, that allowed you to be able to just kind of do what you wanted to do. I want to circle back, because that's a great experiences, because we went to chiropractic college. I think one of the things that made us draw to each other, and we were like, fuck, you know, like, I remember the one part of boards I failed was on Chiro listings, and it was because it was, I didn't study it very well because I didn't think there was like the value of like what they were. There's 4 different ways to do this thing, and then at the end of the day, I'm like, none of this is like adding up to what we're trying to do. But him and I always had a passion for like, there's got to be something going on with the movement. When people are exercising, taking control of this, they get better. People tend to generally get better with like, you know, closing their eyes and trying to touch their nose a lot of times. And then there's those ones that never get better, right? And you got to look at like all the things. But to circle back to you, when you were in that paradigm, like in that school, it sounds like you took a lot of the general sciences, right? Like there's always value in anatomy. You can't know your anatomy well. You can always be good at that. You know your physiology, those kinds of things. It gives you a framework to also call bullshit on things because you have a better understanding of when somebody's trying to use a overly medicalized way of explaining things, right? To like a person, that's very scary when you use the terminology related to anatomy because like just some radiculopathy is a crazy sounding word, you know? You're like, whoa.
Sounds like a Harry Potter.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, so you hear those over medicalized things. You were able to take the information that you wanted, and then also that gives you the ability to call bullshit, right? Because you're like, I can sit down at the table with you, and you're not going to out anatomy with me, right? Like, I understand what those things are. So looking back on all that stuff that you said, what specific things do you see there are faults besides like just the biomedical side of over medicalizing things? But like with programming, because we're here because we want to be better programmers. And we know like that's, like you're the program guy. And with that said, like where do you see like the general fault within? Chiro's different, right? Like it's a manual therapy, so you're only going to take that so far. But with like PT, what should be the medicine of like, hey, we're going to use movement to try to get the body to do the things we want it to do to feel better. Where do you see like the big like, no, this is where they're missing the boat. If there was one major thing within those programs, where is it falling down?
I think programming, number one, I feel like you have to train yourself. Like if you don't have any experience training, having a goal, making any progress, I just can't trust your opinion. And I feel like I would never ask somebody to do something that I haven't done myself. And that also changes the way that I program really frequently. And I'll talk a little bit about this tomorrow, but I was telling somebody that came to the course in New York just recently that I legitimately did not do cardio for 10 years. Probably like up until a year ago.
Like steady state cardio. What do you mean by cardio?
He had the professor telling him to do no cardio.
Well, basically what happened was obviously as a young athlete who was playing a sport where there's a fair amount of aerobic fitness involved, I ran a ton. And then when I stopped playing and I recognized that I could just lift weights and I could control body fat by just having a decent diet, I was like, why the fuck would I do cardio? Once I learned more about the benefits of aerobic exercise, and once I never didn't have my people do it, but then it got to a point where it's like I'm preaching it all the time. I'm programming it, I'm seeing the effects that it's having on people. Like at some point you have to stop ignoring that. So, you know, and that happens for almost everything that I program for somebody. Again, before I do it or I have somebody else do it, I want to do it myself. But the other thing I would say is that, you know, watching somebody really good train people was helpful. And I'll never forget the first couple workouts I saw Buddy and James Smith. James Smith was probably one of my other, I would say he's the top 5 person to learn from. Their workouts for Pitt's football team were super low volume in the weight room. And I remember being like, I was young and I was an idiot and I was arrogant, being like, well, what the fuck, they didn't even hardly do anything today. Like this, you know, I train harder than this, you know, like 20 years old, and I'm thinking volume is king, and I'm, you know, training like how Arnold trained. I thought that was how you train. And they had such low volume, and that was before I understood that in their program, the main stimulus is sprinting and throwing and jumping. And then the weight room was like the accessory to it, but I didn't understand that. watching that still wasn't enough, because I still came out of that and found myself giving people too much volume, underdosing speed work. So really where you learn is just years and years of programming. And you can't really learn that in school. I do think you're gonna actually have to get off your ass a little bit and coach people. And I also think that the way that a lot of people train today may not help you, because if you're not doing anything and you come in and train, you're gonna get better regardless of what you do. You're just gonna adapt to a brand new stimulus. That's what the body does. Like Louis Simmons used to say, the best program is the one that you're not on. So it's very easy to have somebody come in, I can change what they're doing, and I can get them a little bit of progress. But I've been fortunate, and I'm sure you guys have too, to have people who have been with me for 10 years, and I can't simply just do the same thing anymore, because the law of accommodation, the same stimulus, same thing over time, you will have a decrease in response to. So I learned the most from that, from hitting plateaus with people, from making mistakes, from going back and looking at my programs. Honestly, even doing online programming has really helped me too, because the way that I do that is I write it more. So when people come to my gym and train, I don't write anything down. I do everything kind of just off my head. I know that's a little bit different than how some people do it. That's how Buddy always did it. Regardless of how many people we have in the gym, I could have 12 people in the gym. I know all their weights. I don't need to write anything down. Doing online programming, I had to write stuff down from sending somebody a program. It does allow me to go back and re-examine my programs and see what worked and what didn't work. And I do the same thing, so like every summer, that's my busiest time to train people. And at the end of every summer, I'm able to look at all the data that I collected from people, all the things that I tried that summer, and be like, what worked and what didn't work. And I often talk about how one summer I implemented FRC, and after that summer, I never used it again. And it's not because I don't think that those guys are intelligent or that there isn't value to their program. I felt like the time that it took me to implement it with my people and the results that we got, it wasn't worth it. I could accomplish the same things different ways, and so I scrapped it because I felt like I wasted a little bit of time that summer. So I think in order for these people to get better at programming, they actually just have to program. And they have to, PT is tough because you get people that have a certain amount of visits that can come, and then they stop coming.
Yeah.
And so with that model, I don't know how you ever get good at progressing somebody to a point where, if it's like return to sport, how they would ever be ready to return to sport, because they're never there long enough to do that. And I would just suggest that those people do like an internship at a strength conditioning facility or something like that. And or hire somebody that's a strength conditioning coach, let them program for you, and then start to, peel some of that back. Because early on, I hired Ken Skip Hill to do my diet. I had Buddy write my training. I always was trying to learn from guys that I thought knew more than me. And by looking at their programs and how they would adjust things, that would give me ideas about how to adjust things for my clients in the future.
So with programming in general, you got the two different situations with like the general population. You got performance with different athletes, different sports. Do you see like there's a big dichotomy in what you would want to do from a gen pop to like an athlete, like from a qualities of movement standpoint, or are you trying to aim at certain specific targets that you want to see and cultivate those general human characteristics?
I would say there's a lot of crossover. I think you could look at a lot of my general population or even my rehab sessions, and they would look very similar to a strength conditioning session. The intensity might be a little bit lower, the volume might be a little bit lower. I do tend to let Gen Pop people have a little bit more say in their program, just because their goals are different, and they're not, a college athlete is going to go to a program where somebody is not going to give them a choice. if they go pro and they change teams frequently, they're not going to have a choice. So it's a little different in that regard. Like I do give general population clients some say. And I even give athletes, like I want them to have skin in the game too. So I do allow them to have some freedom in choosing things that we're doing. But yeah, for the most part, they're pretty similar. I would just say that general population people, though, I do kind of have just live in GPP, so just general physical preparation. Just in terms of the qualities that develops and the safety of it is, it's hard to argue with. Those people don't want to be banged up, they don't want to get hurt, they typically may not be chasing any kind of crazy goals, and so I'm going to keep it relatively safe for them because at the end of the day, I want them to be able to train as frequently as possible, I want them to have a good experience, and I want them to keep being able to do it for life. And so with the athletes, you know, if you are preparing for a really high level, you do have to understand that sometimes that does come with risks. I wouldn't say the same for general population person. There probably really shouldn't be much risk there unless they want to do that. I have had some people that are like, I have crazy goals and I want to go after them. And it's like, okay, you know, as long as we both understand what's involved with that. But otherwise, yeah, the actual session itself is going to look relatively similar, I would say.
So with programming now, how much of, for like a general pop person, how much of that programming would you say like you have almost pre-done in your mind before they come in? And what are like the main buckets you want to get in GP? Because GP is like a big spectrum, right? On general preparedness on what people look for. Like, do you include things like sprinting qualities, jumping qualities with your GP? Or are you looking at more like the push, pull, carry, squat variables, or all the above?
Yeah, see, so I think it's very hard to pin me down to one thing like that. Like, I'm not going to have the push, pull.
You're not going to give us the exact, like,
no,
come on.
No, like you're not, I don't want anybody to ever be like, okay, he's the push, pull, hinge, carry, lunge guy, he's the kettlebell guy, he's the sprinting guy. I genuinely will look at every single person that comes in through their individual lens, and I will go from there. So, like, before I've met you, I don't have a clue how I'm going to train you. I have had some people who had injuries that I genuinely did not have a single clue what to do with those people. I would have never just had like a, okay, I'm just going to have you do what these other people did kind of an approach.
Right.
To me, general physical preparation is just giving them a foundation of very general qualities, building up their fitness enough that if we do decide to intensify, we can. It's about having movement variability. It's about exposing them to a lot of different means. And it's about, you know, having some active rest for some recovery and restoration periods in there. That's where I would say the majority of people are going to kind of start. I don't make everybody sprint in general population because not everybody wants to. And regardless of what I feel about it, again, if it's an athlete and I know that it's the best thing that they can do and I know they're going to have to run in their sport, it's a little bit different. But not every person that comes to you to train or rehab or get better wants to run. And I'm not going to force them to do that. You know, it's like they come to you for some kind of expertise, and again, I want them to have some say in what they're doing, because they could very easily just say, okay, I'm not going to come anymore. And then it's like, my pride then is the reason that I couldn't help that person, because I felt like they had to do the one thing that I make everybody do. I don't think that there's one thing that I make every single person do. I might have some general recommendations that I tell most people, like I do tell most people to try to do some aerobic exercise. I do tell most people to get an Oura ring or try to track their sleep a little bit. Those might be the things that you could say I'm always telling people to do. I would feel like those are non-negotiables. I don't really believe that anything in the weight room is a non-negotiable. non-negotiable. I believe everything is absolutely general. It's relative to their goal, and I will decide that once they are there and they're in front of me.
Speaking of sprinting, it got me thinking, like, you play tennis, which is a relatively, like, short court, right? Like you're not hitting top end speed getting to a tennis ball ever, right? In those type of sports, even basketball, like short-sided sports, what do you think the value is of training linear top speed?
Or is there value? Is there value in linear top speed with somebody like?
I just had a random thought that I wanted to hear your opinion on.
Yeah, absolutely there is, and there would be numerous reasons why. One of the main reasons why is I would say that I think right now in fitness, the pendulum swings often. You know, we go very one side to the other. Sprinting's kind of hot right now, and I think that's great because there was a period of time where nobody was doing it. I think some people right now might be getting too technical, focusing too much on their mechanics when they're not track and field athletes, they're not pro sprinters. And you have to remember that we are using sprinting more as a general stimulus for the body to adapt to. So I understand that most people that I do speed work with, they are very likely going to revert back to the way they run when they go back and play their sport. I also know that they're not maybe going to get 30, 40 straight yards of linear running. That's not necessarily why we're doing it. We are doing it because it is the most taxing neuromuscular activity with the highest force generating capabilities that we can do for an athlete. A pro sprinter can put 4 to 5 times their body weight per foot into the ground. There's nothing that we can do in the weight room that touches that. The velocity at which it occurs, there's nothing in the weight room we can do that touches that. The way that it trains the hamstrings, there's no weight room exercise that can accomplish what max velocity sprinting will for the hamstrings. And we can use it for developing the alactic system. You could stack them if you want for aerobic development. Some people like doing that. So it's not just about they sprint linear in their sport. I view it just like any other training modality where it's a stimulus, it provides adaptations. I use it because I know that it's going to get people stronger. I know that it's a plyometric exercise. So like it checks so many different boxes that I think if you're an athlete and you're not doing it, you're leaving a lot of room for growth on the table.
Where would you see something like that would fit in for things like golf? If we look at golf athletes in a different way, there's also like a stigma around the old school golf athletes in their training. And they pride themselves sometimes on the lack of training because it's a skill. But like force production is always a big thing with golf. With golf training in particular, I feel there's always a conversation where I need to sit down with somebody, at least when I work with them, and go like, hey, you're doing a lot of this rotation, so realize like we're going to get you better, and you're going to be able to smack the ball harder, but it's not going to look like the golf swing, because the golf swing is like a skill. It's a unique skill and a way of doing that. So where do you think something like that would fall into a sport like golf, right? And that would be to me, that's like a harder sell on like an older athlete on, hey, I want to get you to sprint on your top end for this. So I see like potentially like the future of golf training actually looking more in the lines of like having days where there could be that put into the program.
If a pro golfer or high level golfer came to me and wanted to train, I would make them sprint. Number one, because Dan Paff says that acceleration is a skill. And acceleration doesn't necessarily just have to be sprinting. When you're training speed or you're sprinting, what we're actually obviously training is the nervous system. And the speed that you can contract, relax, that you can impart force. That's what sprinting really is. It's the neurological adaptations that come with it would be valuable for them as well. So I wouldn't just be trying to sell it to them on the basis of like, okay, this is going to make you a faster runner. It's like, no, we're training your nervous system to be able to produce force exceptionally quick, and we're going to hope that that transfers over into your game.
Skill.
We can never say 100% that it does, but that's why it would still be classified as general means for a golfer, and they would still have, like, if you have general preparatory exercises, you have special preparatory exercises. So they want to work on the technical and tactical aspect of the sport, and that's fine, but you are there to develop the qualities that allow them to do those at a higher level. So I think that's how I would do it, and again, I would just explain to them that there is nothing else that you can do that is going to have the kind of demand that sprinting is and that accelerating is. And at the end of the day, they have a ball that's just sitting there, right? So that ball is in a static position, and they're loading and exploding. The sprint is really no different than that. A med ball start to sprint is really no different than that. You are imparting your force on an object, and you are trying to either extend your hips or throw your body, however you like to think about it, as hard as you possibly can. So I would bill it to them as, this is a nervous system activity, and we are training you to be able to explode quickly, and it starts at the top.
Great answer.
Yeah.
I have two really good questions. I'm going to turn it over to someone else to ask some questions. So you're given like a weight room, and you're allowed to have one thing to train with. You just got one tool that you can use. What is that tool?
Are you going to tell me the kind of person that it is, or no?
No, just like you got one tool. Besides your mind, of course. You can't ask for, I want this book to read. Like one tool, one physical object.
No, that's tough. I mean, I guess maybe just a sled. Not a prowler, but a sled. I would say the two things I would choose from would maybe be a med ball or a sled. Only for their versatility. And the sled I could obviously sprint with, but I could also just do all concentric weight training exercises with. So I can do pull-throughs with it, I could walk backwards with it, I can walk laterally with it, I can chest press, rows, face pulls, you name it, all just with a sled.
Sounds like we need to do more sled work.
Med ball, same thing. We could do throws. We could overload a sprint by holding the med ball. You can do some body weight exercises with it with the med ball. So that's what I would probably choose. Probably not. Most people would probably say the barbell, especially good old barbell medicine. We don't
kind of implied.
Yeah, Deb and I don't. We don't really. We don't actually know each other, but we don't see eye to eye. I don't like the name. I don't like what it implies, and I think they're part of the pendulum that I was talking about earlier, which is we had an era where nobody touched weights. It was corrective exercise. We're laying on the floor, and now we think every motherfucker needs a barbell to train in rehab, and it's like, how about we go right back to the middle, where it's like, okay, if you think somebody is so low level that they need some of these exercises, great, but at some point we want them over here. Don't forget that. And if you want to use these means over here, that's fine, but this isn't the end goal. The end goal is just like, can we get that person better? I think once you have something like that in your name, then you view everything through the lens of a barbell or a kettlebell or a sprint or whatever it is. And like I said, I don't ever want to be that kind of person because you end up just trying to fit people into your ideology rather than just doing what's best for them. And so that's why I would say earlier that I don't just have a specific program I would say I think works for everybody. Like I am going to look just like blank slate every person.
That's awesome.
That's a big thing right now. We have a big influx of people coming in because of, oh, I want to learn how to barbell squat. I want to learn how to barbell bench press. I want to deadlift. I want to do, everything with barbells right now. And it's just like, oh, wait a minute. We haven't even seen how you move yet. We haven't even seen what your strength is like yet. Why am I even going to put you on a barbell right now? So when people come in to train, we do a big group fitness. Everyone's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna jump on that barbell. It's like, no, you're not. You're not even gonna touch that barbell for probably like 3 or 4 weeks, maybe even longer, until you get used to the movements and you get a whole introduction of how we train around here and how each individual person here is basically different. So they're like, oh, well, I thought I was gonna barbell squat. It's like, nah, sorry, man. You will, but
Yeah, there
there
are some people that I don't ever put a bar on their back, and it's not because I think that there's anything wrong with that. Like, there's just some people that don't tolerate it, and that's fine. Like, I have a kid that's a pro hockey player that he had never responded well to front squats. His college program had always made him do front squats. And so I was like, we don't need to do front squats. I don't give a shit. We can trap bar. We'll just trap bar. And then he got hurt at school doing a front squat, hurt his back, and then he was fine after that. He's been playing in NHL for a while now. He got hit in his back maybe a year or 2 ago, and that one summer that we had, it wasn't this summer, it was the summer before. It was the most challenging I've ever had an athlete because he couldn't run without pain. So we had an abbreviated offseason because they went to the playoffs. So everything that I would normally do with somebody like him, okay, we normally would sprint. I couldn't sprint. He could not barbell back squat anymore. He couldn't put any kind of load on his back. Luckily, I have a belt squat. That felt okay. The trap bar did not feel okay. And any jumping where he was landing not on a box was reproducing pain. He was in a contract year, so he was exceptionally fragile psychologically and scared of every fucking thing that we were going to do in the gym was going to hurt.
You jeopardize the contract.
So after the first time we tried to do 5 and 10 yard accelerations and it put him in pain, I was like, okay, I mean, this isn't going to work. But, and that's part of coaching is kind of just like problem solving. Like, I'm not so in love with it, but I'm going to keep making it do it. And I knew that, because I know him, I've been training him for 8 or 9 years. Like, he's very, up here, it means a lot. Like, if I can't lose him there. So, the prowler didn't cause any pain. So all of our alactic speed work was done with the prowler. All of our jumps were done to a box with weight. We did seated single leg box jumps to make them more challenging. We did trap bar jumps, and I would move the box squat top over to underneath the box, no problem. We did belt squat. We were able to train. There was one other time early on where I thought, okay, maybe we could do a barbell split squat, and maybe that wouldn't. Nope. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to fuck around with this anymore. Like, we don't have time. We kept it to belt squat. We were doing banded belt squat for like dynamic effort on certain days. We were doing contrast method with it. Like, I was having to do things with those tools that I'd never done before. But I was able to do that just because I understand what I'm training for. And I recognize that none of these things actually matter. It's like, okay, if I'm training dynamic effort, it's like, is the velocity high enough? Is the load at X amount? If those both check the box, then yes, we're training the dynamic effort method. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's a barbell squat. And went, played the entire season and wasn't having any back problems anymore. But, that's just an example where it's like,
So nothing like that where you're able to like change a lot of the variables. Really have to get out of your own comfort zone, right? Because it's challenging your beliefs. Some of those things that you described on what you did, I would be like, well, why does this feel okay and this not feel okay? I didn't see it, but they don't. So you're working within that paradigm, and working within his comfort level, attaining these results. When you go back to training him, and he is feeling 100%, his back is feeling good, does his program drastically change from the one that got him to where he was there to the one that he's going to be doing in the future?
So he was back again this summer. So, I would say that back in the day, I would have had some of those thoughts you were just saying, which is like, well, why can't he this? And why can't he that? And I would try to think about why, but I recognize that that's kind of just like a frivolous endeavor. And there could be a million reasons why, and rather than trying for me to figure out why, I just need to figure out how I'm going to get it better. And like, that's my job. If he wants to hire a philosopher to understand why, or like he can go to a doctor and they can give him some kind of diagnosis that doesn't matter, that's fine. My job was just to make sure he could show up on training camp and play. This summer, I kept some of those things. We were able to sprint this summer, so we did. I still did not put a bar on it. We did not back squat. I just didn't want to risk it. We did still stick mainly to the belt squat, and I did cut off part of my trap bar so we could load split squats like that. We were able to add some other jumping, but I still didn't go crazy with it. So I did change. I did revert it back a little bit, but I didn't forget what I learned the summer before.
And then for him, like with those changes or those previous changes, how were his outcomes? Like at the end of the day, like were the things that you were looking to improve and he was looking to improve attained with the adaptive philosophy for his specific program? Because that's a unique program. He probably is the only individual that has a program that looks like what you described.
Yeah, I've never done that with anybody before. All I know is that every year that he goes to camp, he performs very well, and he's always one of the most in shape guys on the team. It was no different that year, but that year that was not my goal. He legitimately was concerned that he was not going to be able to play. And so I was less worried about what is your vertical jump right now, what is your 10-yard sprint. I just really wanted him to be, because at the end of the day, they don't get paid to vertical jump and to squat and to do a 10-yard sprint. They get paid to play. And, and that's why strength conditioning is a side dish, because it's like there are guys, one summer I went and I worked training camp with the Cardinals. There was a wide receiver on the team at the time who was really, really good, and he just did not want to train. He did one round of walking lunges with one 20-pound chain and vomited in the garbage. And he did nothing all off season. They had set up a place for him to go. He refused to go. He came into camp completely out of shape. I mean, we're talking, that would be like you giving somebody 10-pound weights in each hand and having them do lunges and they throw up from it. And he was a top 15, top 20 wide receiver in the league. So it's fun. They do need to train, and I love my job and whatever, but at the end of the day, you got to be able to play. And so that summer, that's what I cared about. This past summer, I would say I probably did a little bit more, maybe a little bit more sprinting, a little bit less aerobic training, and a little bit more jumping. And I would say he probably had one of his better camps. I think that's just because he really likes, like hockey guys like to kick their ass. So you have to scale back their volume and their effort a little bit. He loves to work out. So he would always try to do more, try to do more. But I think that we were giving up some speed gains because of how much aerobic fitness we were doing at times. And so early on, I would say I made a mistake there, like earlier on in his playing career, because I think we were doing too much of that, and it was detracting from some of the speed and power work, which at the end of the day, like it's still a power speed sport. Yeah. Like you need to be fit, but like Charlie Francis used to always say, Once they show up to training camp and they start playing the game, that's going to take care of their in-game fitness. Like for the most part, like he was just big on like they need to be fast, explosive, powerful. Obviously, he did tempo runs and he did aerobic fitness, so it's not like you don't do any of that. But he did feel like playing the sport was how you get in game shape. And I tend to agree with that more now maybe than I did, 5, 6, 7 years ago.
That's great. This is a really important question, so I got to tie this in. So you're in the weight room, you've been in a lot of weight rooms at this point. You've probably seen lots of different things, like some things better than others. Zombie apocalypse breaks out right now. You're allowed to choose one tool as a weapon. What are you going with?
As a weapon?
Probably not a prowler, right? Like you're gonna get chewed up pushing the prowler back. You're gonna get one zombie. That's it. What are you choosing? Not sled.
No, the sled and the med ball aren't going to cut it there. Maybe a weight releaser, because those are, you know what those are?
No, what is a weight releaser?
So they hook on the bar, and then on the bottom you can put plates on it, so that when the bar comes down and the bottom part hits the ground, the weights drop off.
Oh, okay.
But the top has a little bit of a hook on it, so you could definitely use it as a weapon, right? And you still carry some plates around with it too. And it would be light enough that you could definitely use it as a solid.
Again, versatility.
Versatility. You got long range, short range.
Yep, it extends, it goes in, goes out. So that I think that would be my move.
That's great. That's great. Okay, Fred, where can everybody find you and find more information, your website and social
All the
media?
socials and all that.
You could watch me rant on Instagram, just Fred Duncan, and make a lot of stupid videos on TikTok, which is also just Fred_Duncan. Facebook, same thing, Fred Duncan, nothing too sexy about the name here. That's
You're on YouTube too? I saw your shorts.
yeah. I put YouTube. The algorithm sucks. I mean, so I don't really. I tend not to use it that much. But I'll put stuff up there just because when I write people programs online, and I got to link a video to it, and if I don't know somebody else that has it up there, I got to put a video up there. So I do have some exercises on there, but for the most part, yeah, it would be on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.
Perfect. All right, well, we don't want to take too much of your time. I'm excited for tomorrow and this weekend. We got a bunch of good clinicians and coaches learning together and growing together. Do you have any other seminars coming up, by the way?
Somebody just asked me to come and speak at one with Joe Ken, and he's a strength coach for the Panthers. I think that's in July. We haven't said yes for that one yet.
It's in the works.
Yeah, and then possibly, I'm sure, in New York at Reload again. I enjoy it there. I think they enjoy my company. So.
They do. Reload guys are great.
Yeah, they are. They are. All right. Without further ado, do you have any other closing stuff?
Good, man. Excited for tomorrow. I think we have a good crowd coming out, so it'll be a lot of fun.
Kevin?
You got anything?
We'll learn some common sense tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. So if you like, follow all the shares and all that stuff. Our socials, Kinetic Impact, that's Ignite Performance, right?
Ignite Performance SC. And then Fred Duncan, right?
Yeah.
Simply.
All right. Thank you, guys.